It's been quite some time since there are any new details on Pokémon Sword and Shield, but thanks to the recent Pokémon Direct, we now know way more about what makes Gen 8 different from what came before. Game Freak spent 15 minutes detailing many of the new features coming to Sword and Shield, but that hasn't answered all of our questions. There's still plenty more to discover when it comes to the Galar region, so it's time to max out the old analysis machine to see what secrets and hidden details it can find. And there's a ton here to see, enough that we're splitting up the Sword and Shield analysis. Today, we'll be focusing on the expanded look at the different towns, the wild area, max raid battles, and Dynamaxing. We begin with our first look at a new town. While it appears to be the same place just north of the player's home at first glance, it's actually on the other end of those tracks. Here, the train station is located at the top of a hill, and although the Galar map only shows this station, there's much more around it, including several houses and its own Pokémon Center. And it must be at least somewhat important considering it serves as the gateway to the wild area, but we'll talk about that soon enough. This mainly serves to show that while the Galar region map is detailed, it's not exact. The trailer next shows the Steam Town at night, confirming a day-night cycle. It's an angle we've seen before thanks to the previous Direct, but here the streets are actually populated. Even the strange red, green, and blue objects are revealed to be water fountains for Pokémon. We also see what's on the right side of this town, as several stores are shown, including a barber so players can change their haircut, and a plant shop. Now, the plant shop would seem insignificant, except it shows up in another town. Later in the Direct, we see a second shop featuring the new Pokémon, Gossifleur, in the Grass Gym town. So it has to serve some purpose, right? Well, there's always someone standing outside, so we can't say for sure, but growth looks to be a major aspect of Sword and Shield, and even the new professor, Magnolia, has a garden of her own. Maybe it's possible that players can garden in some way beyond growing berries? Continuing on, we get our first good look at the central city in the Galar region, which features a massive tower. Based on the angle, this seems to be a slightly above ground level look. We can see the upper portion of a wall, as well as another building with a logo that depicts train tracks in the center of what appears to be a planetary map. Perhaps this is the place that manages all the trains in the region? Behind it is what we previously referred to as the private school that reminded us a little of Hogwarts. Now, this does prove that there are 3 levels surrounding the central tower. On the Galar map, we can see nondescript homes just below the wall, then the train building on the level above that, and then the private school above that. The tower is already huge, but seeing how big everything else is next to it shows just how massive it really is. In fact, everything seems to be big in Galar. We get another look at the Dugtrio sculpture to the west of the fortress city, which now could be an ancient reference to the Dynamax ability that's so central to this region. But the rest of the town is kept out of view. But there is certainly more to see beyond this. We get a different view of the Steam City where the female trainer is descending a set of stairs to a lower level. Looking at the background, we can see how the pathway curves to the rear and then continues down. Cities in Galar are going to feel like cities, it seems, rather than just large towns. Multiple levels seem to be a pretty common trend as well. This isn't our only look at the Steam City though. Another short scene shows a Wynot playing hopscotch while a girl and her father watches. Perhaps it'll be possible for the trainer to interact with small games like this as well, maybe as a way of building trust with your Pokémon. There's also a curious detail in the background. Octillery is in a suit and hat and is featured on one of the buildings. Could this be a fire station? Or is something else going on here? And even more curious is the Pokémon Center next to it. This isn't the same street that was shown before, so it appears that this one city has 2 Pokémon Centers. We presume it's for a matter of convenience since the city is so big, but could this also mean that Pokémon battles will take place in the city? We know it houses a gym, so maybe one center is close to the entrance, while the other is close to the gym. And that's our best guess at the very least. But the Steam City is also home to another service in the Galar region, the taxi offered by the new Pokémon, Corviknight. Here we see it along with its trainer in the vehicle itself. It seems pretty likely that this is the replacement for Fly. After all, it can only take you to places you've been before. But this also means that Corviknight's taxi will appear in every town, or it can at least be summoned when needed. It's certainly more impressive looking than a lift. One other thing to mention before moving on from this scene are the NPCs, as two chat in the background while another actually approaches the taxi and acknowledges Corviknight. It's a minuscule thing, but it does show that the NPCs won't stand in the same place at all times and give the slight illusion of a bustling city. It's not entirely surprising, but even the early areas have a grander sense of scale. You still come from a small town, but we can see it lined with farmland as the new Wooloo Pokemon roam around. In fact, the background shows that Wooloo will sometimes move by rolling along the ground. Later parts of the trailer do show them walking normally, but this seems to be their faster method of traveling. The final two town locations we're shown includes the interior of a building and a lighthouse. The lighthouse is almost guaranteed to be the eastern coastal city that we can see on the Galar map. Like the Dugtrio sculpture though, we're not shown the rest of the city. And we don't even know what city this interior shot takes place in. But it is interesting to note that the Pokemon website mentions that companies are eager to have Pokemon on their workforce while showing this screen. What connection it has to the player's adventure as a whole though, we're not sure. Maybe it's possible to get your Pokemon a job and earn extra money? Now, while that's mainly all we saw of the towns around Galar, there's one major aspect here that's well worth talking about: the wild area. It's a massive part of the region where the largest variety of Pokemon roam, and their appearance is dependent on the weather. That said, the trailer is pulling at least a little trickery here. We see lakes, snow, and a desert, giving the illusion that the wild areas are spread all over Galar. But that's the thing. There's only one wild area. Now granted, it is quite huge, stretching all the way from the train station near the southern mountains, around the Steam City, and to the entrance of the Fortress City. That's a lot of real estate to work with, as we see in the trailer. But don't expect the other locations in Galar to be like this. As we see in the footage, every place beyond the wild area works like a traditional Pokemon game with a fixed camera and relatively limited paths. And unlike the wild area, Pokemon can't be seen roaming around. Instead, they must be encountered in the tall grass. That said, it seems special Pokemon can still be found in that grass thanks to exclamations. The way the player seems to stop on a dime, crouch, and then take off seems a little quick to us. It's possible that if the players hit the confirm button when the exclamation appears, the encounter will be automatic, similar to fishing. In fact, we see the same exclamation later in the trailer when showing off fishing. Although the wild area is the only place that's wide open in Sword and Shield, there's still plenty to see within it, and the Direct showed off a ton of different vistas to experience. But we thought it'd be worth showing exactly where each of these scenes take place on the Galar map. It begins with a sweeping pan down the center of the area. We can see the Steam City to the left, its continued wall on the right, the 3 bridges that pass over the valley below, and even the massive Fortress City in the background. That would put the trainer roughly here, just before the land curves into the lake. The next scene takes us north of the Steam City as the camera looks south. We can see the 3 bridges again, as well as the dead trees down below. Notably, there's also this unique looking rock, which means the camera is relatively close to the entrance of the Fortress City. Slightly harder to place is this moment with the Hippopotas. We can still see the clock tower of the Steam City, but only one bridge this time. On top of that, there's no brown grass shown on the map. However, we can see these rocks leaning against one another, which would put the camera slightly behind that. We then go to the southeast of the Steam City, where we can see the clock tower, one of the bridges, and even the slope leading down into the lake. The camera is once again near a large rock, which we can see on the map, so it looks like it's possible to get pretty close to these eastern mountains. And really, bless rocks, because this sandstorm makes it nearly impossible to tell where this is in the wild area. Except we have this line of angled rocks, which just so happens to be on the map, meaning the camera is angled to the southwest and just below the dead trees. And those trees appear once more in the next scene as the camera looks south, so we can see the bridges, the clock tower, and even many of the rock formations we already mentioned. Based on the nearby slope and the rock shelf on the right, it seems the camera is placed here, just as the path is beginning to curve. We then leave the northeast and head southwest to the Steam City. The nearby leaning tower is likely the same one we see here on the map, but the scale of the map is starting to become questionable. We can certainly see the nearby ridge as on the map, yet despite looking southwest, there's no sign of the bridge on the west end. The sloping geography also hides the nearby lake. The wild area is certainly bigger than what the map makes it seem, but the camera is almost certainly placed here, just northeast of the tower. Unfortunately, the lake scene with Gyarados might be a little tricky to place. For one, it features a bridge that just isn't on the map, and second, there's nothing especially noteworthy about the surrounding area. We do suspect that this is the western side of the West Lake though, as the next scene shows the island that's signature of the eastern side of this same lake. The camera seems to be southwest of the Steam City entrance as it looks toward the island. We then see the island again to the left of the trainer as he runs through the center path. This is essentially just a little farther ahead and to the left of the first wild area scene. But what's notable here is that we can indeed spot a Pokemon Center just inside the entrance to the Steam City. So that's one center located. And yet again, it's fascinating to see what's not shown on the Galar region map, as the next scene has the trainer just north of the second bridge. Here we can see a small pond nearby and how the ridge meets with the city wall just ahead. That would put the camera near the eastern ridge looking toward the city's northeast corner. We then return to the north as the trainer is in the middle of the dead trees while a sandstorm rages around him. We even have a vague sense of where the camera is pointing as we can see one of the leaning rocks nearby. That means the camera is facing the southwest. But once again, we have no idea where this next scene takes place. There's a massive clue thanks to this circle of leaning rocks, but they're not represented on the map at all. Our best guess places it near the fortress city with the camera facing to the south, just between the northern body of water and this other rock. It could also be to the east, just north of where the path curves toward the fortress city, though again we can't say for sure. We then get a very clear look at our next location as the trainer is following the path toward the fortress city, and we can clearly see the dead trees and even the small pond to the east, which would put the camera here. Continuing on, we finally get to see the small lake to the southwest of the fortress city, or so you'd think. We can clearly see the city, but also the cylindrical rock that's featured on the map. The angle of the camera and their locations just don't match up, so we believe the map is inaccurate with this portion, namely that the lake is a little farther south, as this would also account for the angle that shows both the city walls and the entrance. For the next scene, we're once again unsure of where this could take place. We know this has to be close to the Steam City, but this seems closer and higher in elevation than what we witnessed previously. Our best guess is this is just south of the Steam City entrance, and the wall is the portion on the eastern side. Perhaps the large rock is the same one on the map, but then it appears closer to the wall here than it does on our map. The trailer then shows off the new method of collecting berries, as this is located opposite of the rundown tower. We think this places us on the island in the western lake. Speaking of which, we then get another look at the island as the trainer does something completely new: whistle. This draws the curiosity of the nearby Pokemon in the grass. It's a unique way of potentially catching the Pokemon that you want. Another thing to note is the nearby rock that we mentioned before. The Galar map makes it seem like the lake area is completely flat, but they're on different levels, which means that the previous scene is likely just south of the Steam City entrance. Finally, we get a better look at the dragon-like entrance to the fortress city as the max raid battle nodes are scattered all around. We can also see the rock shelf and dead trees just below, making it so the camera is looking across from near this rock. A different angle is then shown as the trainer runs along the central path toward the trees, and the leaning rocks are just to the left, putting the camera right here. The Direct also provides a few other glances at the wild area. One shows the Steam City entrance, the western lake with its island, and the ruined tower. As the shot fades and the view widens, we potentially see the bridge where we spotted Gyarados before. It does seem very possible that he was in the westernmost part of the western lake. Another different view places the camera just below the large southern bridge as it looks to the north. We can also spot the small pond with a tree in the center nearby, just before the second bridge. But yeah, every wild area seen from the Direct takes place in these locations, and this is the only place where players will have full camera control. However, there are plenty of reasons to continually explore the wild area. As the Direct says, different weather will affect it and also determine which Pokemon appear. Day, night, sunny, raining, snowy, and sandstorms all hit this area as we've seen, and different Pokemon are shown each time. The Pokemon website has confirmed that it has a greater variety of Pokemon than any single route. Not only that, but this weather changes daily. Of course, it also helps that this is where the new max raid battles take place. They can be seen dotting the landscape, though this seems to be either a choice that players can toggle or something that's not available right away, as we've seen the nodes without any light emanating from them. But when they are active, 4 players can meet up to take part in a raid, either locally or online. What we're not sure of is if these 4 players meeting up is a stock cutscene, since it's highly unlikely that players will be able to roam around each other's games. That being said, it would be pretty cool if the wild area could also serve as an online location for you and your friends to interact and battle together. It makes a certain amount of sense despite being extremely ambitious for Nintendo Online. After all, this is the only place raid battles can appear. This scene also provides our first look at player customization, namely the different clothes that can be worn. While 2 trainers are in the standard clothes, the other 2 show off some of the options. The boy has a different hat, a sports jacket, a button-up shirt with prints on it, and white sneakers. He seems to be wearing the same pair of pants, as he still has the green plaid at his pockets, indicating they're decorative rather than part of another shirt. The girl also has a new type of hat, a more stylish jacket, her own button-up shirt, and shorts. This means, like previous generations, that she doesn't always have to be in a dress. However, we are curious about whether the male trainers can wear different length pants, as their options were usually pretty thin. But let's talk about these raids and their connection to the new Dynamax form. In normal battle, players will now have access to this form, which causes their Pokemon to increase in size tremendously, as well as boost their power. This is reflected in their moves as well, as they're changed to powered forms of that type. Electric attacks become Max Lightning, fighting moves become Max Knuckle, and so on, while any status move becomes Max Guard. The Pokemon website also confirms that these attacks will have extra benefits. For example, the normal move, Max Strike, also lowers the opponent's speed stat. While this is absolutely powerful, it also only lasts for 3 turns. In addition, it can only be used in certain locations such as gym stadiums and the max raid battles. The transformation is triggered thanks to the Dynamax band, which is vaguely reminiscent of the Z-Ring. It definitely has some of the same markings, so they seem to be related in some way. However, the rules change a little during max raid battles. The raid Pokemon is always in its Dynamax form and never reverts during the battle, and only one of the 4 participating trainers can activate their own Dynamax during the raid. But the trainers do get 4 attacks for every one that the raid Pokemon dishes out, so some can focus on attack while the others protect their allies. We see this in action with the creation of either a Reflect or Light Screen. Not only that, but when we see the Gyarados use the Max Water attack, only Golurk is hit, meaning, at least with this move, it can't attack every Pokemon at once. So this is how the battles are balanced, and the players can eventually attempt to capture the raid Pokemon. The raid Pokemon that appears is dependent on the weather. The Pokemon website gives the example that Steenie will appear when it's sunny, while Lantern only shows up when it's raining, and many Pokemon can only be caught in raid battles. Fortunately, if you don't have any local friends at the moment or access to the internet, the game will provide support trainers to get you to the requisite 4, so it's possible to still participate. Of course, Dynamaxing isn't only tied to the raid battles, but the gym battles as well. That analysis will have to wait for next time though, as there's still plenty to cover from this Direct, including the gyms, the new characters, and the new Pokemon. We'll have that analysis ready for you as soon as possible. Of course, let us know if we missed anything about the towns, the wild area, or raid battles in the comments. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to GameXplain for more on Pokemon and other things gaming.